Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a nice lunch break and a good EBC so far. My name is Benedikt Vaupel. I'm head of blockchain at Bitkom, Europe's largest digital association. And I'm very, very thrilled and excited to have some esteemed experts with me who can offer a diverse view and background on Web3 and how to build solid infrastructure for Web3. So before we start, I would say let's do a quick round of introduction. Who are you and why are you here today? And let's start with Demo and then we just go over to you, Adnan.
Cool. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Demetrius Skalkotis. Everybody calls me Demo. I'm the CEO of Expand.network. We are a single API for accessing and connecting you to all of DeFi. So we're an outsourced SaaS infrastructure provider.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Rotundi. I'm a co-founder of Unit Network, which is a parachain on Polkadot network. The Unit Network makes it very easy for everyone to tokenize everything in the world in a very decentralized way. So we're tokenizing real-world assets and making that vision come to reality.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Khan Vashishta. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Zeev. So we are, focused at making Web3 infrastructure really simple by automating, how things are done at Zeev. From app chains to rollups to, normal validated, non-validated nodes, we are automating everything underneath. So yeah, that's what we do. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pachi Barrios. I'm the Web3 product manager at Telefonica, one of the largest telcos in the world, and we use Web3 and other innovation technologies in order to aim or mission of connecting people.
And I'm the CEO of BioCrypt, and we are world's first hybrid Sharia-compliant cryptocurrency exchange. I've been in crypto industry since 2015, and I've seen a lot of inefficiencies in the system, and that was one of the reasons for starting BioCrypt.
All right. So they say that crypto winter is for building, and I know that you all know, of course, what Web3 is about and what we are building for. But maybe to start off, I brought a number. So in Germany, we asked how many people know the term Web3, and 71% said they've heard of Web3, but I doubt that all of them can explain it. So maybe for the audience in front of the screen and here, can any one of you just briefly try to explain what Web3 is about before we dive into what infrastructure to build for Web3?
Yeah, well, I think that Web3, I think that responds to the dilemma of centralization. I like to see in a way that Web3 gives superpowers to the builders in two different ways, I think. The first one is decentralization, so you can create an app that cannot, for instance, shut down. And on the other side, I like to see Web3 as a technology that is iterating and innovating. I mean, it's like Lego pieces that are composable. For instance, and you can get these Lego pieces from other projects. You can build on top, and then you are innovating on top of what you get from other projects. So innovation, the decentralization. So I think that are two main factors that Web3 is allowing to the builders.
Right. To me, Web3 is the first technology which brought the term transparency ever. I have heard before that, transparency was never there. We only heard about programs and softwares and technologies and frameworks doing jobs for us, and we never questioned them. But this is the first time you realize that, oh, there are more than to it than just running softwares, building applications, designing frameworks, designing solutions across the globe, doing different implementations. There is a different angle to it. So now we are trying to define that different angle with Web3, which is about transparency, trust, and how do you actually operate rather than just build. So yeah, Web3 kind of is a new narrative, bringing a new version of solutions towards us, and we just have to accept it in a gradual manner over the time.
All right. So now we got a quick introduction on Web3. Let's dive right into it. So how to build solid infrastructure for Web3. And maybe can we start off by where are we at right now? What is the infrastructure that we are working with right now, that you're building, that you're creating? Who wants to start here?
So with Unit Network, the big thing that we are focused on is the fact that there are very few real applications out there that consumers are using on blockchain. And you look at OpenSea, maybe Uniswap. It's kind of embarrassing how many, maybe 20,000, 30,000 active users per day. I mean, it's out of 8 billion people in the world. It's very tiny. It's not even a sub niche of the world economy. It's a very small part. So a huge part of the infrastructure we're trying to build is making it consumer facing, having people be able to just log in, see a very important reason for them to use a Web3 application, and have it add to their lives the same way people join Facebook or Instagram over the years, or TikTok now. The sort of network effect that can just draw people in. Yes, you can do marketing from a central place, but also you need to have that virality take root. So under that, you have to have the secure, transparent, all the things that people have been doing in blockchain to this point. But to build on top of that, things that people want to use is really, really important.
Just to add on that, I think that the world that we live in is extremely fast-paced and ever-changing. A lot of new protocols, layer ones, layer twos being announced. It's extremely fragmented space, and I think the job that some of us are doing is really trying to eliminate the complexity, allow people to scale quickly, get to the end user applications that they need, and connect people to the applications that they want to use and work with without having to integrate 100 different things independently. And then by the time you get that done, it's all changed again, and you've got to do it again. So you've got to work with, cool infrastructure, SaaS providers that are doing that work so you can scale quickly and focus on your end user and your customer.
Okay, so you're saying everybody's working on it, but that implies that we are still lacking something to have this really solid infrastructure to build on. Or do you think we are already there? Is this like a good status of Web3?
Well, I think a big part of it is that, Bitcoin sort of just created this sort of, in retrospect, sort of a dumb, I send this to this place, and it's a decentralized way of moving a thing from here to there. Ethereum is just a one-lane highway as well. So one of the big infrastructure advancements is this concept of sharding or parachains, or like Avalanche and Cosmos and Polkadot. Ethereum 2.0, a number of other chains are doing this sort of application-based chains that use a secure relay chain or a central layer. That's a really big thing because you can change the blockchain. You can upgrade things without having to fork it. A few years ago, you had the DAO hack on Ethereum, and it was just a massive undertaking to fork the Ethereum blockchain. And there's a lot of controversy and voting, and they say about democracy, it's the worst system of government except for all the others. Well, if you vote and you lose, you don't get what you want. With a forkless upgrade, you can kind of change the chain, and that's a really big thing because we need to be able to evolve in a more seamless way.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic point about what is going to happen. App chains and these new generation of chains. But the interesting question is how the next billion users will be on Web3. And infrastructure is the key to that. So to bring in the next billion set of users on Web3, which are primarily doing Web2 today, they're not doing Web3. So we need to focus upon how those 2.0 users will get to 3.0. And to facilitate that, infrastructure requires a rethinking. It cannot be done the way it was done before. It requires rethinking about how do you bring security, how do you bring compliance, comfort, and how do you bring scalability and address these things in a very generic framework, and then let people come to Web3 over time. It can happen overnight, but you have to define these three primary elements, and then it will happen on its own.
And to add to that point is how to bring the next billion users. We have to understand what actually consists of building a solid Web3 project. And first, we have to understand that the way Web3 ecosystem works. We have to understand the node infrastructure. we have to understand the selection of the right blockchain. If your application is a DeFi application, you have to understand the complexity and security that involves the financial transactions. And one of the main obstacles of bringing the next billion users into the Web3 is the safety and security and trust. Okay, so one of the ways to do that is to have a hybrid approach. And hybrid approach basically means take the best features of centralization and decentralization and combine them into one platform. Because obviously centralization doesn't work. It doesn't work. 2022 was the perfect example why it doesn't work. We had seen what happened with Celsius, Voyager, Babel Finance. Everybody had seen what happened with FTX. People entrusted their funds to a centralized platform and they lost it. Now, we also have fully decentralized platforms, but they are not efficient as well. We have platforms such as SushiSwap, Uniswap, and many other fully decentralized platforms. But because they are fully decentralized, there's no central authority to vet any projects behind them. That's why anybody, literally anybody could have a project on a fully decentralized platform, and that project could turn out to be a honeypot, rug pull, or straight out scam. And one of the examples is 2022. People had lost over $2 billion to fully decentralized platforms. So this is the problem. People are losing money on centralized platforms. People are also losing money to fully decentralized platforms. And nobody is providing a solution. And solution for the future crypto project is basically taking the hybrid approach.
Any comments on this hybrid approach, or go either way, like very centralized or decentralized in that sense?
Yeah, as Telefonica, as you know, is a large enterprise, so we have more than 300 million of customers right now. And the way that we are approaching the fact of how to bring Web2 mainstream users is that what we are trying to do is pairing something that is unique, almost unique, that is a phone number with a decentralized identity, okay? And then we are exploring the way that you can give a new way of transaction, of usability, because, I mean, a phone number, everyone has a phone number. And this is the big project that we have, and not only Telefonica, it's also the camera, it's ESMA, all the telcos together, that we are facing this solution that can bring all massive users to the ecosystem. And one of the things that sometimes it's hard to understand is that talking about decentralization is that large enterprises are used to talk with centralized services, centralized companies, because sometimes we need an face with to talk with, no? I mean, and sometimes the challenge that we are approaching is that the fragmentation of the protocols. So that is really important for us, and in Telefonica especially, to have a trustworthy players in order to achieve this kind of super big projects.
Timo, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a smart approach. I think you got to take the best of both worlds. The pendulum can't swing too far to centralized and too far to decentralized. It's got to be the best of both. And because you've got issues, as we articulated, with smart contracts, vulnerabilities, you've got issues with a single authority in charge, and not everybody plays nice in the sandbox. So I think trying to come up with that best security model and user interface model that meets the best of both worlds and somehow balances out is the right approach.
Well, maybe I'm the decentralized, guy in the group here, but I think that, the goal of all of Web3 and blockchain is to build a free society, have effectively no regulator in charge of regulating the market. The market regulates itself. Yes, we've had a bunch of rug pulls. We've had a bunch of, on the centralized side, we've had a bunch of, frauds. But the goal is to get to blockchains that solve for those problems on their own. So you can't have rug pulls. You have transparent, assets backing things up. However the solutions are, I think we're not to pitch our project, but I think that that's what we're doing, trying to do, is effectively every token has its own backing. You can see what's in there, so it's very transparent. But more transparency, more decentralization, more security, all those things wrapped together is building the free society that and sort of disintermediates governments over time, which is, I think, to me anyway, the objective of building an abundant free society.
I think that that's extremely aspirational, and I don't disagree. I just think that there's a lot of problems we have to solve or try to figure out how to solve from the security part, but also I think from the insurance part too as well. Because there's got to be some level of security if something does happen. If I did fat finger something, or if I did make a mistake, or someone did something inappropriately, there's got to be that insurance layer that kind of gives comfort, because I don't think you're going to get mass adoption if we don't have that layer of security and insurance that I have a remedy to solve a problem if something does happen.
I mean, what you mentioned, and I think the point that we also have to think about is the decentralized and name-only issue, so the Dino issue. So a lot of projects claiming we are very decentralized, but because they are not fully transparent, you don't know who has the stakes in there. So how could we approach this? How could like a fully decentralized Web3 infrastructure work?
How can it avoid being actually centralized while calling itself decentralized? Is that what you mean?
No, how can it be truly decentralized?
Well, if you have sufficient nodes, I mean, some people even say Bitcoin is not that decentralized. I mean, it's the most decentralized I think we have, right? And it's a matter of grade and degree and, adjusting to changes. It's just markets, When someone comes along with a quantum computer to beat Bitcoin's algorithm or Bitcoin's reward structure, people come as entrepreneurs and change that. They're much. Markets are very fluid if they're allowed to work, and they're more and more fluid as they're more and more fluid. It feeds on itself. Whereas the governments, the old traditional structures, which are not thousands of years old, there's only about 400 or 500 years of the nation state being the governing principle of human society. Governments are quite heavy-handed, and regulation doesn't mean government. It means other people regulating each other through this. There's a problem, I will solve it, and get the rewards from doing it as a profit motive, or as just I feel great about it, which is a profit unto itself. Incentive system that's just naturally there as a part of society, or a part of the DAO, one might say.
Yeah, to confirm Joe's point, the whole point of crypto revolution is the desire for decentralization. Decentralization where users are in full control of their own funds in a safe and secure decentralized manner. That's how everything started. Obviously, the banks didn't work. People gave their funds to a bank, and there's no guarantee they're going to get it back. Now, to also support Dima's point, the full decentralization as of right now doesn't work. It doesn't work. As I mentioned previously, 2022, $2 billion lost to fully decentralized platforms. So if you follow the history, we can see that centralization doesn't work, starting with the first cryptocurrency exchange, Mt. Gox, where people lost millions and millions of dollars. They entrusted their funds to a centralized platform and they lost it. Now, a couple of years later, we switched to a fully decentralized model. We are seeing that full decentralization as of right now doesn't work. So the best change is a gradual change. Change that happens overnight doesn't work. Because obviously, decentralization as of right now doesn't work as well. So the best approach is to take the best features of centralization and decentralization and combine them into one platform. And by doing that, what we're going to do is basically we're going to give the users full control of their own funds in a safe and secure decentralized manner. That's the most important thing. So whatever happened to FTX could never happen again. That's the most important thing. But the second important thing is to make sure, to support Dima's point, to make sure there's some level of centralization where if something goes wrong, those people always have the remedy.
So maybe that's a good point right now to address another issue, because until now we've mostly talked about infrastructure in the sense of technological hardware, of programs. However, during the last years, and especially we heard the talks about Mika here today, there has been worldwide efforts to create kind of a regulatory infrastructure for the whole system, to avoid frauds, to avoid decentralized and name-only issues, etc. So let's try it the other way around. Can Web3 be built without regulation or further regulation?
So, let's first maybe, look at the version of decentralization and then how do you regulate it properly? I think both the things are important. So, decentralization won't happen and is just about focusing on technology. That's the wrong approach. If you keep thinking about which protocol has done what level of decentralization, that's not going to solve this. You have to think about how do you control the ownership of the end user without controlling it. That's the message we need to pass. Now, regulations, they will actually define this. So regulations are one version of governance, but now the question is not how they are to be applied. The question is where they have to be applied. So are you going to apply them at the protocol level? Will you program it somewhere? Will you leave it to certain owners who would operate certain specific operations on the chains? Or would you allow them to participate equally and yet govern? So regulations are a framework which will have to fit in somewhere. They may fit at the top level, at the protocol level. They may fit it, at a different level, which can be, an operating layer, or they can fit at, equivalent layer as a user, like you or me, who would be operating and yet governing. So this regulatory framework definition should come out in as well. Usually we talk about what should be the regulation, but my point here is we should talk about how it is to be applied, because if you pick up from the last point of decentralization and to the regulation, the whole bridge is burnt the moment you apply regulation. I mean, from the decentralization perspective, from Joe's perspective, but the moment you make the regulation as a pillar under the bridge, you're helping it forward. You're not burning it. So that's how the regulation should be seen, or a regulatory framework should come around.
Okay, yeah, I think that Web3 is changing the status quo of many things. I think, and regulation sometimes is against this kind of decentralization that we are promoting. But I think that I will talk about the large enterprise, and that can bring new users to this ecosystem. And if we aim that we need to bring this kind of users, so some regulation is needed. No, for instance, in Telefonica, we are applying statements from Financial Action Task Force, who is a company, a lobby that is creating from many years ago the first regulations before Mika. So, it's something that large enterprises are applying since, I don't know, a long time ago. So I think that, regulation is needed if we want to push these corporate companies and these millions of users into this ecosystem.
But isn't that kind of the thesis of the European Union, or has been, that good regulation, that regulatory clarity will attract crypto asset service providers in the EU with Mika, but also then for the Web3 ecosystem. So good regulation could be kind of the attractive part for Europe right now. We see the unclarity in the US partly, why a lot of the companies are coming to Europe right now or looking into the possibility. So how do you see that? Could Web3 regulation attract more businesses?
Well, look, regulation is a tricky thing. I think we all want mass adoption in this space, and you're not going to get mass adoption without a regulatory framework somehow, some way. Now, you could have over-regulation, which makes it extremely burdensome, and that's why it's beneficial to see what's happening in Singapore and in Hong Kong and in Dubai, and in some instances in the UK, that there's an actual dialogue going on with the crypto community and the digital asset community and the regulators to find out what might be fair and useful. That's not happening in the States today at all, unfortunately, because you can get over-regulated. But in order, if we all want mass adoption, there needs to be some aspect of regulation, and there needs to be a dialogue in order to come up with proper regulation. Because again, they're going to take the view of how do I protect the individual consumer? How do I protect the individual investor? Does it get down to every smart contract has a regulatory framework and has a security framework, and if it doesn't follow that framework, it doesn't comply with regulatory standards and it can't be implemented. So it could go overboard, but that's why you have to have a dialogue to understand where is the best for the regulatory framework and how will it best for mass adoption.
So your regulation can only be done by someone that's in power, right? So Uber came along and disintermediated the taxi mafias or monopolies or licensees in different countries all at once. I used to work at a libertarian law firm called the Institute for Justice in the U.S., and one of the things we litigated for was taxi drivers who couldn't get a license to practice their profession free of arbitrary government interference. And we read that into the 14th Amendment, the right to economic liberty. It wasn't written there, but we shopped it around, lost, and then win one case, and then try to get to the circuit court. It's very slow. We did that for barbers and taxi drivers and undertakers and different kinds of things, and whole public rallies. But that's because they had the power. We had to ask the court to give us the power back. Give these entrepreneurs who just wanted to make a living the power back. Well, Uber came and just, okay, if you have a car, you need a ride, that's it, peer to peer. And now the governments have been trying to take that back, and varying degrees of success around the world. But Airbnb, it's all Web2 peer-to-peer, but Web3 is peer-to-peer. I mean, crypto is peer-to-peer on steroids, and Web3 is very intertwined with crypto. So if you peer-to-peer out the ownership of things, ownership of yourself. Let's say you own yourself and you go public as yourself, and you have shares of yourself, and people own a stake in you, only because you chose to share it with them, and now it's publicly traded. It's a market that comes from the bottom up. Then there's no power to be doled out in a regulatory framework that can be then co-opted by an industry. I mean, you look in all over the world, wherever there's regulation, there's capture by the industry. The people that are the biggest in that industry, they capture that regulatory structure and they use it to their own benefit. It's just the nature of government, it's the nature of regulation. So yeah, maybe from getting from here to there, it's this battle that governments will fight back against, the sort of, Web3 warriors, that the bottom up people that are trying to take power through this peer-to-peer structure. But that battle has to be lost by the structures that are centralized, and that's where we can sort of dissolve. We're not there yet, but I mean, Bitcoin is a big jump forward, Ethereum is a big jump forward, and all the things that are being built are attempts at steps forward. A lot of failures. I mean, you have 99% failure on the way to success, but there's some successes, and those things are the ones that stay and become adopted by everybody. So, Bitcoin took a long time to adoption. I mean, not a long time, it's been 14, 15 years. But it's because it was solid. It's not like because it just got to get a bunch of users and then it flames out. It's got solid infrastructure, solid foundation. People kind of came to it and found it. So I think that's the way things will play out over time as well in Web3 generally.
Maybe bringing the question over you to Patsi again, because you work for Telefonica, which is quite an established company. You have to keep regulation and compliance maybe a little bit more in mind than a very small startup located out of Europe. So what right now, in your opinion, is the biggest regulatory or compliance issue that Web3 is facing in Europe, for example?
Yeah, no, I mean, we are applying the MiCA, I mean, for sure, in all the projects that we are doing. And one thing that we sometimes forget, I mean, what we are trying to do is with different oracles. We have a project, for instance, with Chainlink that we are trying to decentralize, for instance, phone number verification. And this is a project that we are doing. So what we are facing is to saving all the phone numbers. So this is also data, personal data. And one thing that, I mean, we are facing and the situation that we are facing is GDPR, for instance. And sometimes we are really focused on MiCA and all the regulation that is now in Europe. But for instance, we are facing a lot of issues with how we are saving data, in this case with oracles, with validator nodes. And for instance, it's something that we didn't expect. And it's a big situation that we are now facing, the GDPR here in Europe.
So maybe a leading question over to you, Adnan. Do you think that looking at the pace in the crypto sector and the Web3 sector, that regulation can ever keep up? Because you mentioned ideas of like we don't need to focus on decentralization versus centralization. Hybrid is the way to go. Creating new frameworks and ideas which regulators then have to keep up with in a few years. So do you think that will ever be the case, that they can keep up with it, or is it always the regulator running behind the innovative pace of Web3 infrastructure?
Well, regulation in the crypto industry is a very sensitive issue. We have to understand how the crypto started. That's what we have to understand. It wasn't supported by the governments. It wasn't supported by the banks. All of those people who wanted to be free from the governments, people who were screwed up by the banks, they were firmly supporting crypto. Okay? Now, after all this, after we've seen that crypto is here to stay, governments and banks, they want to join in. Okay? So, just a couple of years ago, to give you an example, JP Morgan, one of the biggest banks in the world, their CEO, Jamie Dimon, he openly stated that Bitcoin is fraud. Okay? He's not the only one. Obviously, other governments, other banks, they were firmly against Bitcoin. They were firmly against crypto. Right now, a couple of years later, the picture is different. JP Morgan, they have their own trading desk. They have blockchain patents, a lot of blockchain patents in their name. And on top of that, they have their own cryptocurrency. So that tells you everything. Obviously, crypto is here to stay. Now, since they are here, they want to basically kick all of those little people down and take over. The thing is, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Because obviously, those people who supported Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in the beginning, they are still here. The only issue is that full decentralization doesn't work. We've seen that. It doesn't work. So to make the regulation work, we have to take the hybrid approach. We have to understand at what level do we have to regulate. Do we have to regulate at the user level? Do we have to regulate at the platform level? Or do we have to find some kind of way in the middle to regulate? So that's going to be a very, very tricky and very complex way to do.
So what is the way out of this? I mean, it's complex no matter what, but what are some potential ways that you maybe see us going forward, and also us as an industry maturing enough to say like, hey, we provide solutions and we don't say a confrontative approach towards the regulator, but say we can provide XYZ a solution, hybrid solution, whatever other solution. Where do we go from here to build a solid infrastructure and to create this Web3 that you mentioned at the beginning?
When, as I mentioned earlier, we've seen centralization doesn't work. It doesn't work. Whatever happened to FTX is not going to stop. It's not the first exchange or first centralized platform that misappropriated users' funds. It's not going to be the last. It's going to keep happening. Full decentralization doesn't work as well. We have the issues with slippage. We have the issues with trust. A lot of people actually misusing those fully decentralized platforms. And those well-intentioned people who are trying to use those fully decentralized platforms, they get disappointed after they get scammed. So the best approach is actually to take the hybrid approach. Take the best features of centralization and decentralization and combine them into one platform.
Okay, but other approaches? Because, okay, we've heard the hybrid approach, but what does the rest of the panel think? Is that full agreement on hybrid approaches the only one, or do you have other solutions to bring the space forward to also think about the Web3 infrastructure in a broader sense? Khan, maybe?
So this practically goes beyond, hybrid. We have to stop focusing upon, hybrid as a keyword, because if you look at how the governance or control is driven, it is driven from top to bottom, specifically in Web3. Now, top to bottom, if you start consolidating, the bottom, it is individual user, then a pack of users, and then a lot many users. But then at the top, you have a network. So hybrid approach means, uh, this question is not about is it the only approach or there are many approaches. The ultimate approach is about how do you let some people define what they want and then design something or a solution around what they want and then take it to the top. So it's like the early days of Web3, I remember people used to say network of networks. I think Joe would agree, Polkadot itself is a network of networks and, parachains are part of it. Nowadays, we're trying to create rollups, OP stack, ZK rollups, fourth generation, fifth generation chains are coming. If you would focus on one thing they're trying to do is to create that small pack where governance can happen, where regulations can be driven. It's like if you ask me to control 1 million people here, it's impossible. How do I do that? So regulations, you cannot throw them in the air on that banner and say regulated is safe. You gotta actually design a model. Now, how do you design a model? So I'm not saying it's hybrid, but I'm saying you have to start from bottoms up, which means you have to let people connect in the network and define a smallish network. And then derive this small network into a bigger one with certain definitions within the bounds of it. And when you do so, you are defining regulations into them. And so this regulation thing is very complicated, very sensitive, that's all right. At the same time, it's overhyped. You just have to think that you're allowing certain people to decide what they want. That is what is regulation. And then some parties coming in and helping them achieve that. That is regulation, that's it. We want regulation because you won't put a dime on something which you don't control, you don't own, let alone grow. You won't get back. So you want regulations, that's for sure. We want it too, everybody wants it because risk is what nobody wants. So you want regulations. Now you start from bottoms and you define the set of rules between some people and then you let those people define more rules on how they would want to communicate upwards. I'll try to define it in a very technical way, how ZK rollups are seen today. They say that you can create your own smallish network of certain stakeholders. Maybe some banks can come in, some financial institutions can come in, maybe some other enterprises come in. They create their own rollups. And then they push some proof outside on top of Ethereum, the legacy definitions of decentralization, Ethereums of the world, and others. So when you do so, you allow somebody to come in and validate everything and decide if it is right or not without giving them the data, which means regulations are good. You can actually bring them in. You do not have to shy away from that. But again, when I'm saying so, I'm falling towards or leaning towards the hybrid model because this is the hybrid model. I have my own network and Ethereum is a very big network. I'm trying to let somebody come in, regulate everything, decide, validate everything on Ethereum, which I've done on my network, yet not allowing them to have all the data. So I'm giving them the right to change things for better for me and others, but not giving them the data. So.
All right, then maybe let's continue a little bit away from the regulatory aspect of infrastructure again. So what areas of Web3 infrastructure are you keeping a close eye on at the moment? Where's the hot stuff that's being built right now? What are you looking for in the future? What's happening right now? Give us an insight into your very different perspectives maybe of what you keep track of at the moment. Joe?
So what I noticed this morning is that nearly all of the panels or the talks used the word tokenization or tokenizing things, which we started working on unit network. The idea of it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and people would not, even people that were very high up at Ethereum or Polkadot, like it's not going to be the bunch of billions of tokens. There's already 10,000. That's too many. Well, it's sort of it's a tremendous shift. I mean, it's really a sea change in that sort of a trend, that the way people are seeing things. But they're still bored by it. This morning people are they're talking about tokenizing things that are already digital. You have stocks and bonds and REITs, commodities, and they're kind of just, okay, I guess we're doing this at our bank, but what's the benefit of it? Maybe we get some operational efficiencies, but it's not a dramatic change that they're even talking about, really. On the other hand, if you're tokenizing things that are illiquid, like a piece of real estate or a collectible car or a, or a whiskey bottle or something, people are doing those things with NFTs. Okay, I mean, it's not, now you have this token, but it says you own this thing, but unless you go to a government or someone that holds that and they say, yeah, that means you have the deed to this real estate, it really doesn't give you the real estate. So it's this connection between digital things, digital assets, and real world assets. That's the big bridge that I think needs to be and is going to be merged together in a very powerful way that will really kickstart mass adoption of crypto and blockchain by the regular person in the world. As I mentioned earlier, the biggest two applications are OpenSea and Uniswap, and there's something like on the order of 20 or 30,000, users per day, and it's nothing. So, look at Facebook or Apple or Google or Amazon. It's not even in the same ballpark. So that when you can bring yourself, like your brand, people bring it to social media now. They have an Instagram account or a TikTok account, and they try to get a bunch of followers, and they're building their brand effectively. That's the terminology people use. But when you can take that brand and have it be yours, but also liquid, like you go public like a stock, or one might say, that will be a really big trend to follow, and you'll hear about it, I think, in the coming few years. Because it'll just catch fire. People will have a reason to want to use blockchain applications.
So we got tokenization. What other things are you keeping an eye on?
In our case, for instance, we are at the forefront to create the first decentralized telco network. In Mexico, we have a proof of concept, for instance, that the people can share the Wi-Fi. And then if you have a SIM card of Movistar in Mexico and the data, the connection of the Wi-Fi is better than what Movistar is providing, so then you can change the SIM card is changing the data automatically, and then the person who is sharing the Wi-Fi is receiving tokens. In this case, that we are doing a partnership with Helium, and this is a way that we are changing totally the way that telco is working. And here, for instance, it's an example of how the regulation is important, because, for instance, without MiCA, it's not possible to extend this kind of new telco that we are doing, because we cannot create a new economy from the scratch with this kind of telecommunications network. And this is why we are now creating this new telco in Mexico, Brazil, and now we are going to have the first proof of concept in Europe as well.
I agree with both these guys, and Joe, I definitely think the things that I'm looking at are real world assets and tokenizations of real world assets. Also seeing how do you bridge. I think that's going to be a key thing from monitoring that, regulating that, trading that, and what's the regulatory landscape of those things. I think are going to be key, and I think will drive the market. I think the other positive things that we're keeping an eye on is what's really going to happen now with the ETF approvals with Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then how far does it go post those two particular protocols. And then again, it's just mostly the elimination and the fragmentation of this ever-changing space, and how do you make it easy for the end user to use this and get to the yield product that they want, or the lending product that they want, in order for them to properly earn in a secure way.
Well, in general, I could tell you this. All of those projects that were developing during the bear times, during the times, one of the biggest bear markets in the history of crypto, all of those projects that were developing during that time, when there is no funds, all of those projects actually has a great potential, all of them. And some of those projects, I could tell you this, they are going to be the next Amazon, next Microsoft, next Apple in the crypto industry. And there are going to be obviously a few of them. And one of the reasons for that is obviously it's very easy to work and develop during the bull markets. It's easy to work when, based on a simple white paper, some of the investors, they give you $10 million, and based on that, obviously, you can work a couple of years. And once the money runs out, there's no more passion. No more passion. That's why there's over 26,000 projects in the crypto space. I could tell you this, 99% of those projects will fail. 99% of them. And that's why all of those projects that survive this longest crypto winter, they are going to succeed, without any doubt.
All right, so we're nearing the end of our panel discussion. We have 5 more minutes. And adding to what Adnan just said, so you said 99% are going to fail. So imagine we will meet here at the EBC in 5 years, so in 2028. What infrastructure of Web3 will we talk about? Adnan, and then let's do the full circle back to demo.
Well, as I stated previously, without any doubt, it's going to be a hybrid approach. It's going to be a hybrid approach, and this is the reason why. We've seen centralization doesn't work. We've also seen decentralization doesn't work. So the most important thing is give the user the full control of their own funds in a safe and secure decentralized manner. That is the most important thing. So by giving them that, they're not going to be, whatever happened to FTX can never happen again. But at the same time, we have to find a way to give them a centralized trading experience. And the best way to do that is to take the hybrid approach.
Thank you. Patsy.
Yeah, I think sometimes we need to ask, what they want. The end user, if they want a fully centralized, they want a fully decentralized, if they want a hybrid. We have a million of customers that we need to understand what they really want, and then to create new products with technology, because we need to understand that blockchain is technology. So I think that a good balance between centralized, decentralized, and a good worldwide regulatory aspects that can provide some decentralized technology is the way to go.
5 years, EBC, I believe 5 years later, we'll have blockchain as an inherent part of our lives, where everything is so obvious. The next payment you're doing is blockchain enabled. The next message you're sending is blockchain enabled. The next communication you're having is blockchain enabled. It'll become so obvious that you won't even talk about it. I don't want to be here 5 years later talking about it. Do we talk about cloud computing anymore? Do we talk about how internet banking works anymore? So I want to be here and not talking about blockchain at all. I want it to be so obvious to our lives that we live it, don't talk about it.
I like that vision. That's good. The network state, I think, is what's coming. Balaji, some of you may have heard of him. So this concept of communities that are non-physical, non-geographic, or basically countries that don't need a physical space. I think that will take root. We have groups on social media that are kind of people just join in and they can kind of talk there. But when you have something in the middle that you can kind of grab onto, this is yours, and you all have a piece of it, then you have an incentive to join together with the people that are in that community that you've decided to be a part of, not just the one you were born into. And that will be a really powerful positive feedback loop for people to be able to come out of poverty, come out of the situations they were born into that may or may not have been very equal or fair. I think we'll be well on the way in 5 years to that reality. Not all the way, but making big strides.
Yeah, all these guys made great points. I think it's hopefully we'll hear 5 years ago, and no one knows whether we're accessing the Bitcoin network or something that's built on the Ethereum network or the Polkadot network. It's just going to work. You're just going to access what you need to do via some biometrics, your phone number or an email address, and some two-factor biometric authentication, and you're going to move money, you're going to pay for something, you're going to buy something, and you don't know if it's going to be on the Bitcoin blockchain or the Ethereum blockchain or the Polkadot parachains. It's just going to be there and work, and that's kind of what we're striving for.
All right. So first of all, thank you very much to the panelists. I would say a big round of applause for our panelists. And with that, I say thank you. Hopefully, see you not in 5 years, but next year. And with this, I give over to our moderator again. Thank you.